Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons, and this is Guitar Gear and Beer, where I take a piece of gear, talk about it, sort of review it, and simultaneously have a beer I've never had before and discuss that. Could be quite fun, it could be a total mess, let's find out. So the gear in question is the Digitech Whammy. I believe this is the Mark IV, and the beer is a suitably freaky beer. We've gone for Freak Scene New England IPA with Yuzu. Just at this point I'm going to point out there's no sponsorship or endorsement things going on here, advertising. These are things I bought myself, so it's just my opinion. Having said that, I do generally like beer and I am a fan of the Digitech Whammy pedal, so overall it's probably going to be quite positive. If you do want a video that just shows the sounds of the whammy pedal without me just kind of talking about it, I'll put a link up there for a card. But yeah, let's just crack into it. So I'll just go through the settings the pedal has and talk about kind of things you can do with them. So yep, the first one we've got here, oh yeah, just to make it clear, this is a pitch shifting and harmonizing pedal. So it'll take the signal your guitar has and you can either move it up or down, or you can add another signal on top of that, so you could add a harmony part to your guitar without having to have a second guitarist. Anyway, the first setting we have an octave down and octave up. So when you have the pedal like that, it has the octave down sound. When you do that, it has an octave up. So this is technically a harmony, well it's in the harmony section, so it's adding it on top of the guitar sound. So you get your guitar sound as it is, and then you get whatever octave you've added on. So the one that's an octave low is pretty cool. If you're got an intro that has a bass guitar and you don't want to count in, if the part's doubled, you can use that there. You can thicken up or kind of really beef up a part as well by adding it in. It's maybe not the most friendly thing to use in a band situation because you are going into the bass player's frequencies in their territory. And I will say that's a slight criticism of the pedal in general. It's not always the easiest thing to use in a band because it does add in a lot of extra harmony and a lot of extra noise. But that is a cool setting to beef something up. Another use could be if there's a solo that has like an octave divider in it or something and you don't want to bring a separate pedal. Like Paradise City, I've used it on that before because there's a little short solo that has this kind of octave divider thing going on, and that kind of does more or less the same job. The octave up thing is pretty cool as well. You can get your guitar to sound maybe a bit more like a xylophone, or maybe a little bit like a synthesizer as well, because it takes the signal and then puts it an octave up. So at this point I will hopefully find some clips of me playing those. I'll pop the video there and I will open my beer. Oh, bonus tip here, if you don't ever have a beer opener, you can use a can opener. There's these little bits here. So secret bonus tip as well there. Those are done. So this is meant to be like a kind of citrusy, fruity one, I think. Yeah, fruity one with citrus, tropical flavors, and tea. Okay, so it does smell. It smells pretty citrusy, pretty hoppy. Not too different from if you ever do homebrews. It smells a bit like a homebrew. So I'm gonna have some from the bottle, and I'm gonna put some in a glass because that might breathe it a little bit and change how it tastes. And while I let that sit for a little bit, I'll go on to the next setting in the whammy. So this is where we get into the proper harmony, because if you're playing in octaves, it's unison, so technically it's not harmony. We have a fifth down and a fourth down. So when the pedal's like this, let's double check that, yeah. It harmonizes a fifth below. When it is like this, it harmonizes a fourth below. So because the harmony is below the note you're playing, it's a little bit less intuitive than if it was above. But it's still quite a usable setting. I do quite like that one. The fifths and the fourths are the ones I kind of tend to lean on the most in the harmony setting. The most intuitive or usable, I'd say. So that can really beef something up. So it can make it sound like you're playing power chords or inverted power chords if you're just playing a single note line. There's a chance Steve Vai uses this setting in his song called The Animal, but it might be the fourth and fifth up rather than below. So next we have, you can go a fourth down or a third down. So that's your fourth harmony, that's your third, major third. So this is where it's a bit trickier to use because the third is going to clash with notes more than the fourth will probably. So there's kind of two things you can do here. You can either kind of sit and analyze your chords quite thoroughly and really plan it out, or you can just kind of play about, use intuition in your ear and see what melodies and harmonies you come up with, but they're likely to be somewhat unorthodox because you're kind of limited to this thing. Something that I will say at this point that is quite cool to do, if I can find a clip of me doing this I'll put it up and sample the beer finally, is that you can play little dyads, so two notes on your guitar, and then you can harmonize them, so you're kind of getting a seventh chord, or at least some sort of chord with four notes in it when you do that. So hopefully I'll put a clip of me doing that up there. And it's quite nice. It's a very sharp, crisp taste of beer. Quite yeasty as well, actually. Really quite hoppy, and you can definitely taste the citrus and the zest. I think that's what was it? Yuzu? I think that's what that is. I think that's kind of like a citrusy fruit. If I'm wrong, I'll put a little thing up here. A little bit of text telling me. So the next harmonizer setting we have is a 5th up and a 7th up. 5th up like that, 7th up like that. I have managed to use this one before, mainly sticking on the 5th, but then going up to the 7th every so often if you want kind of like more for like a jarring effect than like an actual traditional melodic purpose, for lack of a better phrase. So the next one, I have actually find an example for this one as well. So when it's like this, it goes up a 5th. When it's like that, it's up a 6th. So you can do a sort of pseudo country. It'll sound a bit like a, I don't know, kind of digital electro country thing going on. So there is a clip of that. I'll put that there, and I'm going to go back to this beer. So I do quite like this beer, just to say, but it's maybe more of a warm summer's beer, like a really crisp one, than a winter beer, being quite cold as it is outside just now. So this one, right, this is probably my second favourite setting on the harmony section, my favourite one being the octave, because it's a lot easier to use. This is the 4th up, 5th up. 4th up like that, 5th up like that. And I definitely have clips of this one, so I will put that up once I've finished talking about it a little bit. So there's cool things you can do with this. When I was kind of working out how to use this pedal, I've had this pedal for years. I got this when I was like 16, and I thought, oh, that's cool, you can kind of make pterodactyl noises, you can do the Tom Morello thing, and then it more or less kind of it gathered dust to a certain extent. I tried to use it where I could, but those occasions were far and few in between. So I spent some time a bit later on playing about with it and seeing what sounds I could get that I liked out of it, that were not too Morello sounding. I think he's a great guitar player and I love his sound, but you don't want to rip off someone else's shtick, particularly if it's as unique as that. And this was one I really liked. I used quite a lot of theory to begin with, so I'd maybe play like a power chord and then put the 5th harmony on. So what I'd be doing is the root would be doubling the 5th, and the 5th would be going up to the 9th. And I like 9th chords, so that's something I kind of like the sound of. And then you can kind of think about other stuff as well. So you could start to do, root and a major 3rd. And what that's going to do is give you a major 7th. In fact, my 2-note per string major 7th arpeggios, I'll put a link up there, explains this a bit as well. Because we're harmonising both notes by a 5th, so we're getting the root, the 5th is being harmonised, we're playing the 3rd, and the 7th, major 7th is a 5th up from the major 3rd. So you're getting a major 7th chord from just playing 2 notes. And there's this really cool, like, kind of ambient electro vibe to it. And I like a lot of music like that, like Boards of Canada and Taicho and things. So that kind of really appealed to me. You can get these really, like, big, lush, ambient sounding chords that I think is really cool. But again, not particularly easy to use in a band situation, because you either need people that have got really good ears and can work out what's going on, or are happy to kind of sit down and work out the theory behind what's going on to make everything sound good and cohesive. So anyway, flip of that. Cool. Next setting, this beer is definitely growing on me. It's a very sharp taste, but it's also very moreish. And what I'll say about it actually is, a lot of time with citrus beers, I find them too dry. So, not necessarily initially, but after I have them, my mouth just feels like it's dried out, and I want a glass of water. With that one, I don't. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, next setting, 3rd up, 4th up, 3rd up, 4th up, and this is a major 3rd. So this one, again, with the other ones, it's sort of usable, but you might want to plan out in advance what you're doing. So the next one, on paper, this one really excited me at first, because what you can do is you can have a flat 3rd like this and a major 3rd like that. So in my little teenage head, I was like, hang on, I don't even need another guitarist anymore. I can do all my Iron Maiden harmonies with one pedal, which was very wishful thinking. It's probably possible to do, but it's quite difficult, because you need to be thinking if you're improvising, you need to be thinking in advance of if it's a major or minor third that you want to harmonise with, and it's not particularly intuitive to operate that and play at the same time. And the same thing is if you've worked out a part and you want to harmonise it with this, you need to plot out in advance when you need to shift it and how quickly you need to shift it, because you can kind of make it bend. You could go between the major and minor. So on paper, a cool thing, but I found in reality wasn't that usable, for me anyway. And the last one, this is a pretty out there one. You get a second like this and you get a third like that. So there are uses for this, oddly enough. The second, if you have a kind of bigger chord or like something with a ninth in it and a bit of intentional dissonance, it'll sometimes even that out. Other times it'll sound like a total mess, but sometimes it can sound quite cool. In particular, I found doing harmonics, doing a volume roll and leaving that on was really nice. You get this kind of more of like a soundscapey kind of, not quite a haunting vibe, but definitely like a real vibe from it. And that's the only other thing to say here really, is when you're going between the harmonies or the notes it's putting on top, you can actually catch the ones in between, so it's sort of like a glitching thing to some extent anyway. So with, for example, the fourth and the fifth, right? Say you've got a fourth like that and a fifth like that. If you move it part way, you can actually get in between, so you can get like an augmented fourth. And it's similar with any of the notes, the flat third and the third, you can kind of get a really nasty note in between, which does sound, it sounds bad, but it's like intentionally bad. That's what you're going for. So the only other thing I can think of here that I forgot to mention is with the fifth harmony, when you put the fifth up, it can sound really cool and beef a part up. So I will run a clip of that, and I will have more of my beer while that is playing. So most of these clips will be in my from my riff of days, so I'll put a link to there if you want to check those out. Did a riff every day for a year. That was a grind. So anyway, on the next side here we have a detune. So this is essentially like a kind of pretty naff chorus. It's quite a tacky way of doing it. The shallow one is, as you'd expect, a fairly shallow chorus. It doesn't change it too much. The cool thing you can do here is you can affect the rate of the chorus. So like this is fairly slow. Maybe sounds a bit more like a flanger, and then as you go up here it'll sound faster, so it'll sound a bit more wobbly. And with deep it's the same thing, but more. So when it's like that, again, it's deeper than it is on shallow. I think here on deep and here on shallow are pretty similar from what I remember. And obviously with deep, the further you go down, the kind of more over the top it's going to get. If you're looking for quite a kind of dry sounding, over the top chorus, it is quite a good bet for that. But you know, chorus pedal's obviously going to beat this. They've just put that in as a kind of, it's more of a bonus feature than anything else that I think of. So the classic things that Whammy is known for is the pterodactyl noises. The first setting being the 2 octaves up. So when you're like that, you're normal. When you're like that, it's 2 octaves up. And again, you get all the notes in between. So the really over the top Tom Morello noises, will be using that. I'll put some clips of it on just now, and you can do some cool things as well. You can kind of keep going up and down with it and kind of get little wobbly noises and stuff, so do that there. Yeah, so just as a side note back to the beer, if, like myself, you're not a huge fan of citrus, and actually I don't like excessive hops either, I think it's been done a bit now. Apparently there's oats in this as well, I think that's kind of mellowing it out a bit. I would say this is actually really quite a nice, mellow, citrusy one. So if you sort of like citrus but not that much, that's maybe one to check out. Again, that's the Freak Scene New England IPA with Yuzu. Yep, so the next setting we've got the octave up, so that's normal, that's an octave up, all the kind of things in between. And rather than harmonise it, these ones are going to change the pitch of the guitar, so they're not adding it on like the other section does. This just moves everything up. So these are actually, the octave up is really quite usable, and there's quite cool things you can do with it. So say you're playing a lead line, if you move it down an octave and then move that up, you can get this kind of like synthetic sound from it. Sounds a bit more like a synth or something like that, which I quite like. You know, something like Muse, Matt Bellamy does things like that. The other thing that's quite good for in general, this pedal, is if you're playing in a band with a keyboard, particularly if it's like an originals band and you've got more kind of creative freedom in that regard, it's really quite good at cutting through, because the whammy, making it a synthetic sound, because it is, changing your sound is making a sound that doesn't really exist, will kind of cut through a mix a lot more, in my opinion, because it makes things a lot clearer. As a slight criticism to the pedal, it can add a lot of high end onto the guitar, so you might want to roll off a bit more treble or have an EQ pedal after it in the chain so you can roll that off a bit. This seems to affect single coil guitars more than humbuckers in my experience. And the other thing to mention is I tend to just stick it in the front of the amp out of laziness more than anything else. But if you put it into the effects loop, it does have a different sound as well. It's generally a bit more smoother and a bit less glitchy. So I used to prefer that sound when I got the pedal at first, because I kind of wanted a smoother, more controlled tone. But as I started experimenting with the pedal and realised that the glitchiness is kind of part of the fun of it, I started putting it in front of the amp. So again, that would be another slight criticism of it, is that the tracking is not always great. So that's to say, it's not hugely noticeable, but the more you play it, the more you probably become aware of it. You'll play a note, there'll be a slight delay in it coming through, and also with the it's more noticeable with the octave up, octave down, the very first setting we looked at, because you can sometimes hear that the say you're playing a part and you've got it set to the octave up part isn't totally on the money with where your guitar part is as well. There's a slight, tiny delay between them, which it's more apparent if you're recording and you've got a few parts going on and you've put that in as one of them. It'll sound a tiny bit out, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's something to be aware of. So after the octave up madness, we go the other way, so it comes down. So you get an octave down, so you like that normal, and this will go down an octave. So reference here would be Jack White's infamous Seven Nation Army, the riff from that. He uses the octave down and then plays it on guitar so it sounds like a bass. So if you're in a pinch and you need to record like an idea for a bass line, it's not a bad way of doing that. You can put some overdrive and effects on, get some quite cool sounds, but again, you're going into your bass player's turf, so you want to watch yourself here. And I'll run some clips of those two settings as well. Why I keep picking this up without using the handle, I have no idea. So there's a side note there. So next, you've gone down one octave, so where can you go from there? 2 octaves, that's where. So again, that's normal, that's down 2 octaves and you get everything in between. So this is getting a bit less usable here, because obviously it's like if you, say you played the low E string on a guitar with this flat down, it's like you're playing a bass dropped an octave. So that's really low. It will change the timbre as well, and this happens with the pitch shifting upwards, which was what I was getting at before. So because you're playing, say, a G string and you drop it down an octave, it's going to sound quite different to if you're playing something in the same pitch on the low E string. There's a real difference in texture because you're playing on a different string, a thinner string that has a different sound to it. Which I think is why I really like the sound of the octave up and octave down, because you can play melodies and lead lines on the 3 wound strings, and it's just got this real kind of richness to this real thickness that I really like. So after this we've got Dive Bomb, which I think is actually 3 octaves, so you like that, you're normal, and then all the way down. So if you don't have a Floyd Rose and you need to do songs where you do dive bombs, that's quite good for that. If you want to just make noises as well, if you stick like a delay pedal either in front or behind it and just mess about with this, and you can do that with most of the settings on here, you can just go mad. So yeah, that's quite a good point of reference there. There's a Tom Morello bit in it might be Township Rebellion, where it sounds like bagpipes at the start, and what he's doing is just switching between the harmonized settings on the side here, because the bagpipe essentially got the drone noise and then they're playing over the top of it. So slightly not more than anything else there. Right, and after that we've got the final setting, which is the drop tune. So you're like this, it's normal, you're like that, it moves everything down a tone. So I think the idea behind this was that if you're playing, say you've got a guitar that's set up for standard and you're playing songs that are down a tone, you can just use the drop tune and you don't have to retune everything. So in theory, that sounds good. In practice, it's not the most convincing sound. You can use it quite well if you're doing something like Lonely Boy by the Black Keys and it has that little dip. Or if you want a kind of surf thing going on and you don't want to use your whammy bar if you don't have one. I've used the drop tune for that on a couple of songs for years. You just play a chord and you want it to kind of go down a tone and back up. There's some other cool things you can do with it, and I will run that there just now. So particularly with stuff like chords, the drop tune for me, I wouldn't use it live unless you wanted it to sound glitchy and out of tune. Then that would be a good thing to do. And that is, I suppose, that's a slight thing with the whammy pedal in general, that it is a bit glitchy. I quite enjoy that now because I played with it for a while. But you get kind of weird sounds that you don't always expect to be there, and part of learning to use it is knowing how to accentuate these sounds and how to limit them as well, which is just kind of an experience thing. It's the same with like playing guitar and muting strings and making it sound clean or making it sound dirty intentionally. So I mean, the only other thing I'd say for this is it's really quite good for creativity. If you're in a bit of a rut, you can kind of just spend some time messing about with it, just like playing, not even trying to write something, and eventually you'll probably come up with something quite cool. I think there's still a huge potential for people other than myself. I think I've kind of got more or less what I can from it for the type of music I play, but I think the harmonizer settings, there's a lot of scope there for someone who thinks a bit more outside the box to come along and kind of do something with. I mean, if you had like two whammy pedals together and you had two different harmony sounds on, you can maybe do some cool stuff. It might be a total mess. I suppose the other thing it's pretty good for is if you like doing looper stuff, because then you can go down the octave and add in a bass line of sorts, which is, I mean, the octave down is fairly good for if you're doing single lines. If you're doing chords, it gets pretty muddy. The rest of them, in all fairness, I'd say most of the settings handle chords relatively well. The octave double down, the very first setting, isn't great, and then anything else that goes down again is a bit ropey, unless you're using it as an effect to kind of come into or out of a chord, like a kind of or whoop kind. But other than that, maybe stay clear of chords. But there might be a way of doing it that I just haven't come across yet. If you know about that, let us know. Yeah, so just to round up this somewhat rambling video, I mean, I really like this pedal, as you may have guessed. It's been a staple of my pedal board for quite some time. The only other things to mention is it's got a MIDI in, so I think you can use this with like keyboards or anything with the MIDI out. Please don't quote me on that because I've never used it. There's a dry out as well if for some reason you want to mix the two sounds together, or maybe if you just want like a risk-free one, so say you're recording and you want to experiment with the whammy but you also want to get like a safe take, you could use the dry out for that in a different track. Yeah, not for everyone. I do really like it. If you're looking for weird noises and maybe get into some more experimental stuff, shake up your playing, it's maybe worthwhile trying out. This one here, this beer, the Freak Scene New England IPA with Yuzu, I quite like this. I'll probably buy it again. I was not too convinced at the start because it is quite zesty, but yeah, overall a good beer. So they both good in my book there. So as a sort of side note, if you are interested in buying a whammy pedal as a result of this video, I'll put a link to Thumbman in the description. I get a really small commission from that, so that sort of thing does help me out. And if I can find a link for the beer, I'll put one there as well. If you've enjoyed this, check out some other stuff I've done, hit subscribe, let me know in the comments if you want kind of different content or whatever. Share, like, and enable notifications with that little bit on the side, if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.